I do know that the boys were watching the drop site, okay? And they got curious as to what was being dropped there.
According to reports from the FBI, DEA, Customs, and the Arkansas State Police, money and drugs were indeed being dropped from low-flying aircraft at night. These drops were part of a major drug smuggling operation headquartered at the airport in Mena, Arkansas. In 1982, cocaine trafficker Barry Seal had moved his multi-million-dollar cocaine smuggling operation from Louisiana to Arkansas and was permitted by government officials to continue his activities without interference. Arkansas State Police investigator Russell Welch and IRS federal agent Bill Duncan accumulated more than 20,000 pages of documents detailing the drug trafficking and money laundering activities at Mena.
The airplanes, the aircraft that Barry Seal had there at Rich Mountain Aviation, were there was only one purpose for them. There was only one use for that type of aircraft, and that was smuggle cocaine. They had special cargo doors installed in the side without FAA permission, so that these doors could be opened in flight. They'd pull in, slide back, and cocaine could be dropped out of the side in flight.
Indictments were prepared against 29 individuals and presented to a federal grand jury in 1986. Barry Seal was scheduled to testify in Arkansas when suddenly he was gunned down.
Bill Duncan and I interviewed Barry Seal less than 2 months before he was killed, and he was served with a subpoena at that time. He was under subpoena to come to Arkansas and testify before the grand jury here when he was killed.
20 other witnesses were scheduled to testify, but only 3 were allowed to appear before the grand jury. 2 of those witnesses were barred from presenting any evidence. As expected, the grand jury was shut down and no indictments were issued. The drug smuggling activities continued after Seal's death. To date, a total of 9 separate state and federal investigations into Mena have been shut down.
The first indication I had that Mena made tired of the death of these 2 kids was through an audio tape provided to me by Russell Welch, an Arkansas State Police investigator assigned to Mena. The tape was of a confidential informant inside the Federal Corrections Facility. That tape would allege that Don Henry and Kevin Ayers were killed because of a connection to Mena, Arkansas. An actual report was generated by Saline County Sheriff's Office in 1987 and in 88 of people complaining of the planes flying over the tracks at approximately 100 feet above ground level with their lights out at night.
One of the pilots who had been involved in the Mena drug smuggling operation, when interviewed by John, indicated the area where the boys had been murdered was indeed a drop site location known as A12.
He described to me an aerial view of the tracks. If you were coming in from the west, flying to the east toward Little Rock, he described a mountain to the right and flying over a set of railroad track lights that govern the trains. The thing about these lights, they stretched across the tracks. The train drove under them. Then he said you could see a runway, a small runway to the left, appeared to be private, and then a beacon on top of a building to the right, and then you would know to make the drop. I have interviewed 5 pilots, 4 of which can verify the A12 location being the tracks just west of Little Rock, Arkansas, where these 2 kids' bodies were found.
Thanks for joining us tonight on American Investigator. This is our final segment, so please make your calls brief. Let's go back to the phones. Jerry in Huntington, Arkansas. Go ahead, you're on the program.
Is there any connection, Mr. Brown, between this drug operation in Mena and the death of the 2 young boys on the railroad track that were murdered and were ruled accidental death by the state medical examiner, Fanny Malik?
There have been some allegations, I think is what the caller is talking about, that they had stumbled on an airdrop that was in transit from Mena to Little Rock.
Any evidence
well,
for that?
Again, you know, without saying too much, there is going to be some testimony from me that, and it's very little, but there is some connection just that I know of. Now, I was the first investigator that was assigned to that case of the boys' deaths and was taken off of it, so you can make your inference and go from there on it, but it's something that is going to resurface. It was a tragic event.
By now, another eyewitness had emerged who had seen Harmon with Kevin and Don at the tracks the night of the murder.
I was out in the woods and came up on 5 people speaking to each other on the railroad tracks. One of them I definitely recognized as Dan Harmon. The rest of them are not as positive, but I'm definitely 100% sure one was Dan Harmon. And they stood there talking for about 20 minutes, and then I noticed 2 more people, Kevin and Don, walking down the railroad tracks. They noticed that there was someone else on the tracks and stopped and hesitated.
After confirming the truthfulness of the witness, the FBI offered to place the witness in protective custody and instructed John to turn over all of his information to them, promising to solve the case before the end of 1994. The FBI also stated that Chuck Banks would be charged with obstruction of justice, which prompted Gene Duffy to come out of hiding. In June of 1994, Gene and John Brown met for the first time.
During that meeting, she would share with me all of her files. At that time, I realized why I had not been allowed to look at the 1990 federal grand jury investigation that was conducted during the time frame she was still in Arkansas. It was then I realized why she was really run out of town. It was real shocking to find out that what Gene Duffy found in 1990 were the same things I was finding in 1994. Drug trafficking that involved political figures, law enforcement officers, involved in the cover-ups of deaths. 4 years later, separately and independently from anything she ever done, I tracked almost the same thing identical that she did. Right straight to law enforcement personnel, right straight to the state capitol.
At the Arkansas State Capitol, Governor Clinton shared an adjoining office with state drug czar Robert Shepard. Shepard, a former sheriff from Dan Harmon's district, was appointed by Clinton to lead Arkansas's so-called war on drugs. On at least 3 occasions, Shepard attempted to suppress investigations into Kevin and Don's murders. In 1990, Shepard paid a visit to U.S. Attorney Chuck Banks to persuade him that Gene Duffy should be ignored. In 1993, Shepard told John Brown that his career would be better off if he concentrated his efforts elsewhere. And in 1995, FBI agent Phyllis Cornyn reported that Shepard had attempted to interfere with the case.
The fact is, we know who killed these kids. The problem is now, how long are we going to wait? How long is it going to take before we make the decision that we're going to indict the murderers, and we're also going to indict the people that covered this thing up? Paula Casey, the U.S. District Attorney in Little Rock, has said, we're not going to talk about airplane drops. Why? That's why they were killed. How long do they have to go before justice prevails in Arkansas?
When the Mena connection was made in my mind and I looked back on everything that had happened, I knew it was the only thing that had ever made sense to me. And this information had been available for years, but had been suppressed.
Of course, now I look back on the chain of events and realize that I likely caused the shutdown of my own investigation. It's clear to me that the turning point was when I gave Chuck Banks the information developed by my task force that the boys were killed because they had stumbled upon a large shipment of drugs dropped from an airplane.